Did you hear what I was playing, Lane?
I didn't think it polite to listen, sir.
I'm sorry for that for your sake. I don't play accurately. Anyone can play accurately, but I play with wonderful expression. As far as the piano is concerned, sentiment is my forte. I keep science for life.
Yes, sir.
And speaking of the science of life, have you got the cucumber sandwiches cut for Lady Bracknell?
Yes, sir.
By the way, Lane, I saw from your book that on Thursday night when Lord Shoreman and Mr. Worthing were dining with me, 8 bottles of champagne are entered as having been consumed.
Yes, sir. 8 bottles and a pint.
Why is it that at a bachelor's establishment, the servants invariably drink the champagne? I ask merely for information.
I attribute it to the superior quality of the wine, sir. I've often observed that in married households, the champagne is rarely of a first-rate brand.
Good heavens, is marriage so demoralizing as that?
I believe it is a very pleasant state, sir. I myself have had very little experience of it up to the present. I've only been married once, and that was in consequence of a misunderstanding between myself and a young person.
I don't know that I'm much interested in your family life, Lane.
No, sir. It is not a very interesting subject. I never think of it myself.
Very natural, I'm sure. That will do, Lane. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Lane's views on marriage seem somewhat lax. Really, if the lower orders don't set us a good example, what on earth is the use of them? They seem as a class to have absolutely no sense of moral responsibility.
Mr. Ernest Worthing.
How are you, my dear Ernest? What brings you up to town?
Pleasure. Pleasure. What else should bring one anywhere? Eating, as usual, I see, Algy.
I believe it is customary in polite society to take some slight refreshment at 5 o'clock. Where have you been since last Thursday?
In the country.
What on earth do you do there?
Well, when one is in town, one amuses oneself. When one is in the country, one amuses other people. It is excessively boring.
And who are the people you amuse?
No, neighbors. Neighbors.
Got nice neighbors in your part of Shropshire.
Oh, perfectly horrid. Never speak to one of them.
How immensely you must amuse them. Oh, by the way, Shropshire is your county, is it not?
Hey, Shropshire? Yes, of course. But why all these cups? Why cucumber sandwiches? Why such reckless extravagance in one so young? Who is coming to tea?
Oh, merely Aunt Augusta and Gwendolen.
How perfectly delightful.
Yes, that is all very well. But I'm afraid Aunt Augusta won't quite approve of your being here.
May I ask why?
My dear fellow, the way you flirt with Gwendolen is perfectly disgraceful. It's almost as bad as the way Gwendolen flirts with you.
I am in love with Gwendolen. I have come up to town expressly to propose to her.
I thought you had come up for pleasure. I call that business.
How utterly unromantic you are.
I really don't think there's anything romantic in proposing. It is very romantic to be in love, but there is nothing romantic about a definite proposal. Why? One may be accepted. One usually is, I suppose. Then the excitement is all over. The very essence of romance is uncertainty. If ever I get married, I shall certainly try to forget the fact.
I have no doubt of that, dear Algy. The divorce court was specially invented for people whose memories are so curiously constituted.
There's no use speculating on that subject. Divorces are made in heaven. Don't touch the cucumber sandwiches. I had them ordered specially for Aunt Augusta.
Well, you have been eating them all the time.
That's an entirely different matter. She is my aunt. Have some bread and butter instead. The bread and butter is for Gwendolen. Gwendolen is devoted to bread and butter.
Oh, well, how very good bread and butter it is, too.
No, my dear fellow, you need not eat as if you were going to eat it all. You behave as if you were married to her already. You're not married to her already, and I don't think you ever will be.
What on earth do you mean? Why did you say that?
Well, in the first place, girls never marry the men they flirt with. Girls don't think it right.
Oh, that is nonsense.
It isn't. It is a great truth. It accounts for the extraordinary number of bachelors one sees all over the place. In the second place, I don't give my consent.
Your consent?
My dear fellow, Gwendolen is my first cousin. And before I allow you to marry her, you must first clear up the whole question. of Cecily.
Cecily? What on earth do you mean? What do you mean, Algy, by Cecily? I know no one of the name of Cecily.
Bring me that cigarette case Mr. Worthing left in the smoking room last time he dined here.
Yes, sir.
Do you mean to say you have had my cigarette case all this time? I wish to goodness you would let me know. I have been writing frantic letters to Scotland Yard about it. I was very nearly offering a large reward.
Well, I wish you would offer one. I happen to be more than usually hard up.
Well, there's no point offering a large reward now that the thing is found.
I think it is rather mean of you, Ernest, I must say. However, it makes no matter, for now that I look at the inscription inside, I find that the thing isn't yours after all.
Of course it's mine. You have seen me with it 100 times. You have no right whatsoever to read what is written inside. It is a very ungentlemanly thing to read a private cigarette case.
Oh, it is absurd to have a hard and fast rule about what one should read and what one shouldn't read. More than half of modern culture depends on what one shouldn't read.
I am quite aware of the fact, and I do not propose to discuss modern culture. It isn't the sort of thing that one should talk of in private. I simply want my cigarette case back.
Yes, but this isn't your cigarette case. This cigarette case is a present from someone of the name of Cecily, and you said you didn't know anyone of that name.
Well, if you want to know, Cecily happens to be my aunt.
Your aunt?
Yes. Charming old lady, she is too. Lives at Tunbridge Wells.
But why does
Give it back to me, Algy.
Why does she call herself Little Cecily if she's your aunt and lives at Tunbridge Wells? From Little Cecily with her fondest love.
Well, my dear fellow, what on earth is there in that? Some aunts are tall. Some aunts are not tall. That is a matter that surely an aunt may be allowed to decide for herself. You seem to think every aunt should be exactly like your aunt. Well, that is absurd. Oh, for goodness sake, just give it back to me, Algy.
But why does your aunt call you her uncle? From Little Cecily with her fondest love to her dear Uncle Jack. There's no objection, I admit, to an aunt being a small aunt, but why an aunt, no matter what her size may be, should call her own nephew uncle, I can't quite make out. Besides, your name isn't Jack at all. It is Ernest.
It isn't Ernest. It's Jack.
You have always told me it was Ernest. I've introduced you to everyone as Ernest. You answer to the name of Ernest. You look as if your name was Ernest. You are the most earnest-looking person I ever saw in my life. It's perfectly absurd you're saying your name isn't Ernest. It's on your cards. Here is one of them. Mr. Ernest Worthing, B4, the Albany. I shall keep this as proof your name is Ernest if ever you attempt to deny it me, or to Gwendolyn, or to anyone else.
Well, my name is Ernest in town and Jack in the country, and the cigarette case was given to me in the country.
Yes, but that does not account for the fact that your small Aunt Cecily, who lives at Tunbridge Wells, calls you her dear uncle. Come, old boy. You would much rather have the thing out at once. Tell me the whole thing. I may mention that I have always suspected you of being a confirmed and secret Bunburyist, and I'm quite sure of it now.
Bunburyist? What on earth do you mean by a Bunburyist?
I shall reveal to you the meaning of that incomparable phrase as soon as you are kind enough to inform me why you are Ernest in town and Jack in the country.
Well, produce my cigarette case first.
Here it is. Now, produce your explanation and pray make it improbable.
My dear fellow, there is nothing improbable about my explanation at all. In fact, it is perfectly ordinary. Old Thomas Cardew, who adopted me when I was a little boy, made me in his will guardian to his granddaughter, Miss Cecily Cardew. Cecily, who addresses me as her uncle, from motives of respect that you could not possibly appreciate, lives at my place in the country under the charge of her admirable governess, Miss Prism.
Where is that place in the country, by the way?
That is of no matter to you, dear boy. You are not going to be invited. And I may tell you candidly, the place is not in Shropshire.
I had suspected that, my dear fellow. I have Bunburied all over Shropshire on 2 separate occasions. Now, go on. Why are you Ernest in town and Jack in the country?
My dear Algy, I don't know if you will be able to understand my real motives. You are hardly serious enough. When one is placed into the position of guardian, one has to adopt a very high moral tone on all subjects. It is one's duty to do so. And as a high moral tone can hardly be said to conduce very much to either one's health or one's happiness, in order to get up to town, I have always pretended to have a younger brother of the name of Ernest, who lives in the Albany and gets into the most dreadful scrapes. And that, my dear Algy, is the whole truth, pure and simple.
The truth is rarely pure and never simple. Modern life would be very tedious if it were either, and modern literature a complete impossibility.
That wouldn't be at all a bad thing.
Literary criticism is not your forte, my dear fellow. Don't try it. What you really are is a Bunburyist. I was quite right to say you are a Bunburyist. You're one of the most advanced Bunburyists I know.
What on earth do you mean?
You have invented a very useful younger brother called Ernest, in order that you may be able to come up to town whenever you like. I have invented an invaluable permanent invalid called Bunbury, in order that I may be able to go down into the country whenever I choose. Bunbury is perfectly invaluable. If it wasn't for Bunbury's extraordinary bad health, for instance, I wouldn't be able to dine with you at Willis's tonight, for I've been engaged to Aunt Augusta for more than a week.
I haven't invited you to dine with me anywhere tonight.
I know. You're absurdly careless about sending out invitations. It's very foolish of you. Nothing annoys people so much as not receiving invitations.
Yes, well, you had much better dine with your Aunt Augusta.
I haven't the slightest intention of doing anything of the kind. To begin with, I dine there on Monday, and once a week is quite enough to dine with one's own relations. In the second place, whenever I do dine there, I'm always treated as a member of the family and sent down with either no woman at all or two. In the third place, I know perfectly well whom she will place me next to tonight. She will place me next to Mary Farker, who always flirts with her own husband across the dinner table. That is not very pleasant. Indeed, it is not even decent. The amount of women in London who flirt with their own husbands is perfectly scandalous. Besides, now that I know you to be a confirmed Bunburyist, I naturally want to talk to you about Bunbury. I want to tell you the rules.
I am not a Bunburyist at all. If Gwendolyn accepts me, I'm going to kill my brother. Indeed, I think I'll kill him in any case. Cecily is becoming a little too much interested in him. It is rather a bore. So I am going to get rid of Ernest. And I suggest you do the same with with your invalid friend who has the absurd name.
Nothing will induce me to part with Bunbury. And if ever you get married, which seems to me to be extremely problematic, you'll be very glad to know Bunbury. A man who marries without knowing Bunbury has a very tedious time of it.
Oh, that is nonsense. If I marry a charming girl like Gwendolyn, and she is the only girl I've ever met in my life who I would marry, I certainly won't want to know Bunbury.
Then your wife will. You don't seem to realize that in married life, 3 is company and 2 is none.
Now, that, my dear young friend, is the same theory that the corrupt French drama has been propounding for the last 50 years.
Yes, and that the happy English home has proved in half the time.
Oh, for goodness sake, don't try to be cynical. It is very easy to be cynical.
My dear fellow, it isn't easy to be anything nowadays. There's such a lot of beastly competition about. That must be Aunt Augusta. Only relatives or creditors ever ring in that Wagnerian manner. Now, if I get her out of the way for 10 minutes, so that you have an opportunity of proposing to Gwendolyn, may I dine with you at Willis's tonight?
Well, I suppose so, if you want to.
Yes, but you must be serious about it. I hate people who are not serious about meals. It is so shallow of them.
Lady Bracknell and Miss Fairfax.
Dear Algernon, I hope you're behaving very well.
I'm feeling very well, Aunt Augusta.
That's not quite the same thing. In fact, the two things rarely go together.
Dear me, you are smart.
I am always smart. Am I not, Mr. Worthing?
You're quite perfect, Miss Fairfax.
Oh, I hope I am not that. It would leave no room for developments, and I intend to develop in many directions.
I'm sorry for a little late, Algernon, but I was obliged to call on dear Lady Harbury. I hadn't been there since the death of her poor husband. I never saw a woman so altered. She looked quite 20 years younger. And now I'll have a cup of tea and one of those nice cucumber sandwiches you promised me.
Certainly, Aunt Augusta.
Gwendolyn, won't you come sit here?
Thanks, Mama. I'm quite comfortable where I am.
Good heavens, Lane. Why are there no cucumber sandwiches? I ordered them specially.
There were no cucumbers in the market this morning, sir. I went down twice.
No cucumbers?
No, sir. Not even for ready money.
That will do, Lane. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
I am greatly distressed, Aunt Augusta, at there being no cucumbers, not even for ready money.
It really makes no matter, Algernon. I had some crumpets with dear Lady Harbury, who seems to be living entirely for pleasure now.
I hear her hair has turned quite gold from grief.
It certainly has changed its color. From what I, of course, cannot say. Thank you. Oh, and Algernon, I've got such a treat for you tonight. I'm going to send you down to Mary Farker. She's such a nice woman and so attentive to her husband. It's delightful to watch them.
I'm afraid, Aunt Augusta, I shall have to give up the pleasure of dining with you tonight after all.
Well, I hope not, Algernon. It would put my table completely out. Your uncle would have to dine upstairs. Fortunately, he is accustomed to that.
It is a great bore, and I need hardly say a terrible disappointment to me. But the fact is, I have just received a telegram to say that my poor friend, Bunbury, is very ill again. They seem to think I should be with him.
You know, I think it is very strange this Mr. Bunbury seems to suffer from curiously bad health.
Yes, poor Bunbury is a dreadful invalid.
You know, I think it is high time that Mr. Bunbury decide whether he's going to live or to die. This shilly-shallying with the question is absurd. Nor do I in any way approve of this modern sympathy for invalids. I consider it morbid. Illness of any kind is not something to be encouraged in others. Health is the primary duty in life. I would be obliged if you would ask Mr. Bunbury from me if he would be kind enough not to have a relapse on Saturday. For I rely on you to arrange my music for me. It is my last reception, and one wants something that will encourage conversation, particularly at the end of the season when everyone has practically said whatever they were going to say, which in most cases was not very much.
I'll speak with Bunbury, Aunt Augusta, if he is still conscious, but I think I can promise you he'll be all right by Saturday. Now, the music is a great difficulty. You see, if one plays good music, people don't listen, and if one plays bad music, people don't talk. But I'll go over the program I've drawn out if you will kindly come into the next room for a moment.
Oh, well, thank you, Algernon. That's very thoughtful of you. I'm sure the program will be delightful after a few expurgations. Gwendolyn, you'll accompany me?
Certainly, Mama.
Charming day it has been, Miss Fairfax.
Hey, don't talk to me about the weather, Mr. Worthing. Whenever people talk to me about the weather, I always feel quite certain that they mean something else, and that makes me so nervous.
Well, I do mean something else.
I thought so. In fact, I am never wrong.
Well, I would like to be allowed to take advantage of Lady Bracknell's temporary absence.
I would certainly advise you to do so. Mama has a way of coming back suddenly into a room that I have often had to speak with her about.
Miss Fairfax, ever since I met you, I have admired you more than any girl I have ever met since I met you.
Yes, I am quite well aware of the fact. And I often wish that in public, at any rate, you had been more demonstrative. For me, you have always had an irresistible fascination. Even before I met you, I was far from indifferent to you. We live, as I hope you know, Mr. Worthing, in an age of ideals. And my ideal has always been to love someone of the name of Ernest. There is something in that name that inspires absolute confidence. The moment Algernon first mentioned to me that he had a friend called Ernest, I knew I was destined to love you.
You really love me, Gwendolyn?
Passionately.
Oh, darling, you don't know how happy you have made me.
My own Ernest.
But you don't really mean to say that you couldn't love me if my name wasn't Ernest?
But your name is Ernest.
Well, yes. I know it is. But suppose it was something else. You mean to say you couldn't love me then?
That is clearly a metaphysical speculation, and like most metaphysical speculations, has very little reference at all to the actual facts of real life as we know them.
Personally, darling, and to speak quite candidly, I don't care much about the name of Ernest. I don't think the name suits me at all.
It suits you perfectly. It is a divine name. It has a music of its own. It produces vibrations.
Well, really, Gwendolyn, I must say, I think there are lots of other much nicer names. I think, for instance, Jack, a very nice name.
Jack? No, there is very little music in the name Jack. If any at all, indeed, it does not thrill. It produces absolutely no vibrations. I have known several Jacks, and they all, without exception, were more than usually plain. Besides, Jack is a notorious domesticity for John, and I pity any woman who is married to a man called John. She would probably never be allowed to know the entrancing pleasure of a single moment's solitude. The only really safe name is Ernest.
Gwendolyn, I must be christened at once. I mean, we must be married at once. There is no time to be lost.
Married, Mr. Worthing?
Well, you know I love you, and you led me to believe, Miss Fairfax, that you were not completely indifferent to me.
I adore you. But you haven't proposed to me yet. Nothing has been said at all about marriage. The subject has not even been touched on.
Well, may I propose to you now?
I think it would be an admirable opportunity. And to spare you any possible disappointment, Mr. Worthing, I think it only fair to tell you quite frankly beforehand that I am fully determined to accept you.
Oh, Gwendolyn.
Yes, Mr. Worthing, what have you got to say to me?
You know what I've got to say to you.
Yes, but you don't say it.
Gwendolyn, will you marry me?
Of course I will, darling. How long you've been about it? I'm afraid you've had very little experience in how to propose.
Oh, my own one. I have never loved anyone in the world but you.
Yes, but men often propose for practice. I know my brother Gerald does. All my girlfriends tell me so. What wonderfully blue eyes you have, Ernest. They are quite blue. I hope you will always look at me just like that, especially when there are other people present.
Mr. Worthing, rise, sir, from this semi-recumbent posture. It is most indecorous.
Mamma, I must beg you to retire. This is no place for you. Besides, Mr. Worthing has not quite finished yet.
Finished what, may I ask?
I am engaged to Mr. Worthing, Mamma.
Pardon me, you're not engaged to anyone. When you do become engaged, I, or your father, should his health permit it, will inform you of the fact. An engagement should come on a young girl as a surprise. Pleasant or unpleasant as the case may be, but it is hardly a matter that she could be allowed to arrange for herself. And now, Mr. Worthing, I have a few questions to put to you. While I'm making these inquiries, you, Gwendolyn, will wait for me below in the carriage.
Mama.
In the carriage, Gwendolyn. Gwendolyn, the carriage.
Yes, Mama.
You may have a seat, Mr. Worthing.
Thank you, Lady Bracknell, but I prefer standing.
I feel bound to tell you that you're not down on my list of eligible young men, although I have the same list as the dear Duchess of Bolton has. We work together, in fact. However, I am quite willing to enter your name should your answers be what a really affectionate mother requires. Do you smoke?
Well, yes, I must admit I smoke.
I'm glad to hear it. A man should always have an occupation of some kind. There are far too many idle men in London as it is. How old are you?
35?
A very good age to be married at. I have always been of the opinion that a man who desires to get married should either know everything or nothing. Which do you know?
I know nothing, Lady Bracknell.
I'm pleased to hear it. I do not approve of anything that tampers with natural ignorance. Ignorance is like a delicate exotic fruit. Touch it, and the bloom is gone. The whole theory of modern education is radically unsound. Fortunately, in England, at any rate, education produces no effect whatsoever. If it did, it would probably prove a serious danger to the upper classes and lead to acts of violence in Grosvenor Square. Now, what is your income?
Between 7,000 and 8,000 a year.
In land or investments?
Oh, investments, chiefly.
Oh, that is satisfactory. Between the duties expected of one during one's lifetime and the duties exacted from one after one's death, land has ceased to be either a profit or a pleasure. It gives one position and prevents one from keeping it up. That's all that can be said about land.
Well, I have a country house with some land, of course, attached to it. About 1,500 acres, I believe, but I don't depend upon it for my real income. In fact, as near as I can make out, the poachers are the only people who can make anything out of it.
A country house? How many bedrooms? Well, that point can be cleared up afterwards. Oh, you have a townhouse, I hope? A girl with a simple, unspoilt nature like Gwendolyn could hardly be expected to reside in the country.
I own a house in Belgrave Square, but it is let by the year to Lady Bloxham. Of course, I can get it back whenever I like at 6 months' notice.
Lady Bloxham, I don't know her.
No, she goes about very little. She is considerably advanced in years.
Nowadays, that is no guarantee for respectability of character. What number in Belgrave Square?
149.
Oh, the unfashionable side. I thought there was something. However, that can easily be altered.
You mean the fashion or the size?
Well, both, if necessary, I presume. Now, to minor matters, are your parents living?
I have lost both of my parents.
Oh. To lose one parent, Mr. Worthy, may be regarded as a misfortune, but to lose both looks like carelessness. Who was your father? He was evidently a man of some wealth.
I'm afraid I really don't know. The fact is, Lady Bracknell, I said I had lost both of my parents. It would be nearer to the truth to say that my parents seem to have lost me. I don't really know who I am by birth. I was, well, I was found.
Found?
The late Mr. Thomas Carden, an old gentleman of an extremely kind and generous disposition, found me and gave me the name of Worthing because he happened to have a first-class ticket to Worthing in his pocket at the time. Worthing is a place in Sussex. It is a seaside resort.
Where did this charitable gentleman who had a first-class ticket for a seaside resort find you?
In a handbag.
A handbag?
Yes, Lady Bracknell, I was found in a handbag, a somewhat large black leather handbag with handles attached to it. An ordinary handbag, in fact.
In what locality did this Mr. Thomas Cardew come across this ordinary handbag?
In the cloakroom at Victoria Station. It was given to him in mistake for his own.
The cloakroom at Victoria Station?
Yes, the Brighton line.
The line is immaterial. Mr. Worthing, I confess I'm somewhat bewildered by what you've just told me. To be born, or at any rate bred, in a handbag, whether it has handles or not, seems to me to display contempt for the ordinary decencies of family life. Reminds one of the worst excesses of the French Revolution. I presume you know what that unfortunate movement led to. As for the locality, a cloakroom at a railway station might serve to conceal a social indiscretion. It's probably been used for that purpose before now, but it could hardly be regarded as an assured basis for a recognized position in good society.
Well, may I ask you then what you would advise me to do? I need hardly say I would do anything in the world to ensure Gwendolyn's happiness.
I would strongly advise you, Mr. Worthing, to try to acquire some relations as soon as possible, and to make a definite effort to produce, at any rate, one parent of either sex before the season is quite over.
Well, I don't see how I could possibly manage to do that. I can produce the handbag at any moment. It is in my dressing room at home. I really think that should satisfy you, Lady Bracknell.
Me? Me, sir? What has this got to do with me? You surely cannot imagine that I and Lord Bracknell would dream of allowing our only daughter, a girl brought up with the utmost care, to marry into a cloakroom and form an alliance with a parcel? Good day, Mr. Worthing.
Good day. Oh, for goodness sake. Don't play that idiotic tune, Algy! How idiotic you are.
Didn't it go off all right, old boy? You don't mean to say Gwendolyn refused you. I know it is the way she has. She is always refusing people. I think it most ill-natured of her.
Oh, Gwendolyn is as right as a trivet. As far as she is concerned, we are engaged. Her mother is perfectly unbearable. Never met such a gorgon. I don't really know what a gorgon is like, but I'm quite sure Lady Bracknell is one. In any case, she is a monster without being a myth, which is rather unfair. I beg your pardon, Algy. I suppose I shouldn't speak about your own aunt in that way before you.
My dear fellow, I love hearing my relations abused. It's the only thing that makes me put up with them at all. Relations are merely a tedious pack of people who haven't got the smallest knowledge about how to live, nor the remotest instinct about when to die.
No, that is nonsense.
It isn't.
Well, I won't argue about it. You always want to argue about things.
That is exactly what things were originally made for.
Upon my word, if I thought that, I'd shoot myself. You don't think there's any chance of Gwendolyn becoming like her mother in about 150 years, do you?
All women become like their mothers. That is their tragedy. No man does. That's his.
Is that clever?
It is perfectly phrased. And quite as true as any observation in civilized life should be.
I am sick to death of cleverness. Everybody is clever nowadays. You can't go anywhere without meeting clever people. The whole thing has become an absolute public nuisance. I wish to goodness we still had a few fools left.
We have.
Oh, well, I should certainly like to meet them. What do they talk about?
The fools. Oh. About the clever people, of course.
What fools?
By the way, did you tell Gwendolyn the truth about your being Ernest in town and Jack in the country?
My dear fellow, the truth isn't quite the sort of thing that one tells to a nice, Sweet, refined girl. What extraordinary ideas you have about the way to behave to a woman.
The only way to behave to a woman is to make love to her if she is pretty and to somebody else if she is plain.
Oh. That is nonsense.
What about your brother? What about the profligate Ernest?
Oh, well, I shall got rid of him by the end of the week. I shall say he died in Paris of apoplexy. Lots of people die quite suddenly of apoplexy, don't they?
Yes, my dear fellow, but it's hereditary. It's the sort of thing that runs in families. You had much better say a severe chill.
You're quite sure severe chill isn't hereditary or anything of that kind?
Of course it isn't.
Very well then. My poor brother Ernest is carried off suddenly in Paris by a severe chill. So, that gets rid of him.
But I thought you said that Miss Cardew was a little too much interested in your poor brother Ernest. Won't she feel his loss a good deal?
Oh, that is all right. She is not a silly romantic girl, I am quite glad to say. She has a capital appetite, goes on long walks, and pays no attention at all to her lessons.
I would rather like to see Cecily.
I will take very good care that you never do. She is excessively pretty, and she is only just 18.
Does Gwendolyn know that you have an excessively pretty ward who is only just 18?
Oh, well, one doesn't blurt these things out to people. Gwendolyn and Cecily are certain to become extremely great friends. I'll bet you anything you like that a half an hour after they have met, they will be calling each other sister.
Women only do that when they have called each other a lot of other things first. Now, if we want to get a good table at Willis's, we really must go and dress. Do you know it is nearly 7? I'm hungry.
Oh, well, I never knew you when you weren't.
Well, what should we do after dinner? Go to a theater?
Oh, no. I loathe listening.
Let us go to a club.
Oh, no. I hate talking.
Well, we might trot around the Empire at 10.
Oh, no. I can't bear looking at things. It's all just so silly.
Well, what shall we do?
Nothing.
It is awfully hard work doing nothing. However, I don't mind hard work where there is no definite object of any kind.
Miss Fairfax.
Gwendolyn, upon my word.
Algy, kindly turn your back. I have something very particular to say to Mr. Worthing.
Really, Gwendolyn, I don't think I can allow this at all.
Algy, you always adopt a strictly immoral attitude toward life. You are not quite old enough to do that.
Dear Gwendolyn.
Ernest, we may never be married. From the look on Mamma's face, I fear we never shall. Few parents nowadays pay any regard to what their children say to them. The old-fashioned respect for the young is fast dying out. Whatever influence I ever had over Mamma, I lost at the age of 3. But, although she may prevent us from becoming man and wife, and I may marry someone else, and marry often, nothing that she can possibly do can alter my eternal devotion to you.
My own darling.
The story of your romantic origin, as related to me by Mamma with unpleasing comments, has naturally stirred the deeper fibers of my nature. Your Christian name has an irresistible fascination. The simplicity of your character makes you exquisitely incomprehensible to me. Your town address at the Albany I have. What is your address in the country?
The Manor House, Woolton, Hertfordshire.
There is a good postal service, I suppose. It may become necessary to do something desperate. That, of course, will require serious consideration. I will communicate with you daily.
Oh, my own one.
How long do you remain in town?
Until Monday.
Good. Algy, you may turn round now.
Thanks, I've turned around already.
You may also ring the bell.
Oh, you will let me show you to your own carriage, my own darling?
Certainly.
I will show Miss Fairfax out.
Yes, sir.
A glass of sherry, Lane.
Yes, sir.
Tomorrow, Lane, I'm going Bunbury.
Yes, sir.
You can put up my dress clothes, my smoking jacket, and all the Bunbury suits.
sir.
I hope tomorrow, Lane, it will be a fine day.
It never is, sir.
Lane, you are a perfect pessimist.
I do my best to give satisfaction, sir.
There is a sensible, intellectual girl. The only girl I ever cared for in my whole life. What on earth are you so amused at?
Oh, I'm a little anxious about Bunbury, that is all.
If you don't take care, your friend Bunbury will get you in a serious scrape someday.
I love scrapes. They are the only thing that are never serious.
Oh, that is nonsense, Algy. You never talk anything but nonsense.
Nobody ever does.
Cecily, surely such a utilitarian occupation as the watering of flowers is rather Moulton's duty than yours, especially at a moment when intellectual pleasures await you. Your German grammar is on the table. Pray open it at page 15. We will repeat yesterday's lesson.
But I don't like German. It isn't at all a becoming language. I know perfectly well that I look quite plain after my German lesson.
Child, you know how anxious your guardian is that you should improve yourself in every way. He laid particular stress on your German as he was leaving for town yesterday. Indeed, he always lays stress on your German when he is leaving for town.
Dear Uncle Jack is so very serious. Sometimes I think he is so serious that he cannot be quite well.
Your guardian enjoys the best of health, and his gravity of demeanor is especially to be commended in one so comparatively young as he is. I know no one with a higher sense of duty and responsibility.
I suppose that is why he often looks a little bored when we three are together.
Cecily, I am surprised at you. Mr. Worthing has many troubles in his life. Idle merriment and triviality would be out of place in his conversation. You must remember his constant anxiety for that unfortunate young man, his brother.
I wish Uncle Jack would allow that unfortunate young man, his brother, to come down here sometime. We might have a good influence over him, Miss Prism. I'm sure you certainly would. You know German and geology and things of that kind influence a man very much.
I do not know that even I could produce much effect on a character that, according to his own brother's admission, is irretrievably weak and vacillating. Indeed, I am not certain I would desire to reclaim him. I am not at all in favor of this modern mania for turning bad people into good people at a moment's notice. As a man sows, so should he reap. You must put away your diary, Cecily. I really do not see why you should keep a diary at all.
Well, I keep a diary in order to enter the wonderful secrets of my life. If I didn't write them down, I should probably forget all about them.
Memory, dear Cecily, is the diary we all carry about with us.
Yes, but it usually chronicles the things that have never happened and couldn't possibly have happened. I believe that memory is responsible for nearly all the 3-volume novels that exist today.
Do not speak slightingly the 3-volume novel, Cecily. I myself wrote one in earlier days.
Did you really, Miss Prism? How wonderfully clever you are. I hope it did not end happily. I don't like novels that end happily. They depress me so much.
The good ended happily and the bad unhappily. That is what fiction means.
I suppose so. But it seems very unfair. Was your novel ever published?
Alas, no. The manuscript was abandoned. I mean in the sense of lost or mislaid. To your work, child. These speculations are profitless.
But I see dear Dr. Chasuble coming up through the garden.
Dr. Chasuble! This is indeed a pleasure.
And how are we this morning? Miss Prism, I trust you are well?
Miss Prism has just been complaining of a slight headache. I think it would do her so much good to have a short stroll with you in the park, Dr. Chasuble.
Cecily, I have not mentioned anything about a headache.
No, dear Miss Prism, I know that, but I felt instinctively that you had a headache. Indeed, I was thinking about that, and not my German lesson, when the rector came in.
I hope, Cecily, you are not inattentive.
Oh, I'm afraid I am.
Well, that is strange. Were I fortunate enough to be Miss Prism's pupil, I would hang upon her lips. Metaphorically. I meant metaphorically. My metaphor was drawn from bees. Yes, bees. I suppose that Mr. Worthing hasn't returned from town yet?
We do not expect him until Monday afternoon.
Ah, yes. He usually likes to spend his Sunday in London. He's not one whose sole aim is enjoyment, as by all accounts that unfortunate young man, his brother, seems to be. But I will not disturb Egeria and her pupil any longer.
Egeria? My name is Letitia, Doctor.
A classical allusion merely, drawn from the pagan authors. I shall see you both, no doubt, at evensong?
I think, dear Doctor, that I will have a stroll with you. I find I have a headache after all, and I feel a walk would do it good.
With pleasure, Miss Prism. With pleasure. We might go as far as the schools and back.
That would be delightful. Cecily, you will read your political economy in my absence.
Horrid political economy. Horrid geography. Horrid German.
Mr. Ernest Worthing has just driven over from the station. He has brought his luggage with him.
Mr. Ernest Worthing, B for the Albany. Uncle Jack's brother. Did you tell him Mr. Worthing was in town?
Yes, miss. He seemed very much disappointed. I mentioned to him that you and Miss Prism were in the garden. He said he was very anxious to speak with you privately for a moment.
Ask Mr. Ernest Worthing to come here. I suppose you'd better speak to the housekeeper about a room for him.
Yes, miss.
I have never met any really wicked person before. I feel rather frightened. I'm so afraid he will look just like everyone else. He does.
You are my little cousin Cecily, I'm sure.
You must be under some strange mistake. I'm not little. In fact, I believe I'm more than usually tall for my age. But I am your cousin Cecily. You, I see from your card, are Uncle Jack's brother, my cousin Ernest. My wicked cousin Ernest.
Oh, I am not at all wicked, cousin Cecily. You mustn't think that I am wicked.
If you are not, then you've certainly been deceiving us all in a very inexcusable manner. I hope that you have not been leading a double life, pretending to be wicked and being really good all the time. That would be hypocrisy.
Of course, I have been rather reckless.
I'm glad to hear it.
In fact, now that you mention the subject, I have been very bad in my own small way.
Well, I don't think you should be so proud of that, though I'm sure it must have been quite pleasant.
It is much pleasanter being here with you.
I can't understand how you're here at all. Uncle Jack won't be back till Monday afternoon.
That is a great disappointment. I'm obliged to go up by the first train on Monday. I have a business appointment that I am very anxious to miss.
Couldn't you miss it anywhere but in London?
No, the appointment is in London.
Oh, well, I know, of course, how important it is to not keep a business engagement if one wants to retain any sense of the beauty of life. But still, I think you'd better wait till Uncle Jack arrives. I know he wants to speak to you about your emigrating.
About my what?
You're emigrating. Uncle Jack is sending you to Australia.
Australia. I'd rather die.
Well, he said at dinner on Wednesday night that you would have to choose between this world, the next world, and Australia.
Well, the accounts I have received of Australia and the next world are not particularly encouraging. This world is good enough for me, cousin Cecily.
Yes, but are you good enough for it?
I'm afraid I'm not. That is why I want you to reform me. You might make that your mission if you don't mind, cousin Cecily.
I'm afraid I have no time this afternoon.
Would you mind my reforming myself this afternoon?
It is rather quixotic of you, but I think you should try.
I will. I feel better already.
You're looking a little worse.
That is because I am hungry?
Ah, how thoughtless of me. I should have remembered that when one is going to lead an entirely new life, one requires regular and wholesome meals. Won't you come in?
Thank you. Might I have a buttonhole first? I never have any appetite unless I have a buttonhole first. A pink rose.
Why?
Because you are like a pink rose, cousin Cecily.
I don't think it can be right for you to talk to me like that. Miss Prism never says such things to me.
Then Miss Prism is a short-sighted old lady. You are the prettiest girl I ever saw.
Miss Prism says that all good looks are a snare.
They are a snare that every sensible man would like to be caught in.
Oh, I don't think I would care to catch a sensible man. I shouldn't know what to talk to him about.
You are too much alone, Dr. Chasuble. You should get married. A misanthrope I can understand. A womanthrope never.
Believe me, I do not deserve so neologistic a phrase. The precept as well as the practice of the primitive church was distinctly against matrimony.
Well, that is obviously the reason why the primitive church has not lasted up to the present day. And you do not seem to realize, dear doctor, that by persistently remaining single, a man converts himself into a permanent public temptation. Men should be more careful. This very celibacy leads weaker vessels astray.
But is a man not equally attractive when married?
No married man is ever attractive, except to his wife.
And often I've been told, not even to her.
That depends on the intellectual sympathies of the woman. Maturity can always be depended on. Ripeness can be trusted. Young women are green. I spoke horticulturally. My metaphor was drawn from fruits. But where is Cecily?
Oh, perhaps she followed us to the schools.
Mr. Worthing.
Mr. Worthing?
This is indeed a surprise. We did not look for you until Monday afternoon.
I have returned sooner than I expected. Dr. Chasuble, I hope that you are well.
My dear Mr. Worthing, I trust this garb of woe does not betoken some terrible calamity.
My brother.
More shameful debts and extravagance?
Still leading his life of pleasure?
Dead.
Your brother, Ernest, is dead?
Quite dead.
What a lesson for him. I trust he will profit by it.
My dear Mr. Worthing, I offer you my sincere condolence. You have at least the consolation of knowing that you were always the most generous and forgiving of brothers.
Poor Ernest. He had many faults, but it is a sad, sad blow.
Very sad indeed. Were you with him at the end?
No, he died abroad in Paris, in fact. I had a telegram from the manager of the Grand Hotel last night.
Was the cause of death mentioned?
A severe chill, it seems.
As a man sows, so shall he reap.
Charity, my dear Miss Prison. Charity. None of us are perfect. I myself am peculiarly susceptible to drafts. Will the interment take place here?
No, he seems to have expressed a desire to be buried in Paris.
In Paris? I fear that hardly points to any very serious state of mind at the last. You would no doubt have me make some slight allusion to this tragic domestic affliction on Sunday. My sermon on the meaning of the manna in the wilderness could be adapted to almost any occasion, joyful or, as in the present case, distressing. I have preached it on harvest celebrations, christenings, confirmations, days of humiliation, and festal days.
That reminds me, you mentioned christenings, Dr. Chasuble. I suppose you know how to christen all right. But of course, you are continually christening, aren't you?
It is, I regret to say, one of the rector's most constant duties in this parish. I have often spoken with the poorer classes on the subject, but they don't seem to know what thrift is.
But is there any particular infant in whom you are interested in, Mr. Worthing? Your brother was unmarried, was he not?
Oh, yes.
People who live entirely for pleasure usually are.
But it isn't for any child, dear doctor. I mean, I'm very fond of children. No. The fact is, I would like to be christened myself this afternoon, if you've nothing better to do.
But surely, Mr. Worthing, you've been christened already.
I don't remember anything about it.
Have you any grave doubts on the subject?
Well, I certainly intend to have. Of course, I don't know if the thing would bother you in any way, or if you think I'm a little too old now.
Well, not at all. The sprinkling, or indeed the immersion of adults, is a perfectly canonical practice.
Immersion?
You need have no apprehension. Sprinkling is all that is necessary, or indeed in this case I think advisable. Our weather is so changeable.
Yes.
At what hour would you like the ceremony to take place?
Oh, I might trot around about 5, if that would suit you.
perfectly. Oh, yes, perfectly. In fact, I have 2 similar ceremonies to perform at that time. A case of twins that occurred in one of the outlying cottages of your own estate. Poor Jenkins the Carter. A most hard-working man.
Well, I don't think it would be fun to be christened along with other babies. It would be childish. So, would 5:30 do?
Oh, admirably. Oh, yes, admirably. Now, Mr. Worthing, I will not intrude any longer into this house of sorrow. I would merely beg you not to be too much bowed down by grief. What often seem bitter tidings are blessings in disguise.
This seems to me a blessing of an extremely obvious kind.
Uncle Jack.
Oh, I'm so pleased to see you back. But what horrid clothes you've got on. Do go and change them.
Cecily!
My child. My child.
What is the matter, Uncle Jack? Do look happy. You look as if you have a toothache, and I've got such a surprise for you. Who do you think is in the dining room? Your brother.
Who?
Your brother, Ernest. He arrived about half an hour ago.
What? Nonsense. I haven't got a brother.
Oh, don't say that. However badly he may have behaved to you in the past, he is still your brother. You couldn't be so heartless as to disown him.
Why?
I'll tell him to come out, and you will shake hands with him, won't you, Uncle Jack?
Well, these are very joyful tidings.
After we had all been resigned to his loss, his sudden return seems to me peculiarly distressing.
My brother is in the dining room. I don't know what it all means. I think the whole thing is perfectly absurd. Oh, good heavens!
Brother John, I have come down from town to tell you that I am very sorry for the trouble I've given you, and that I intend to lead a better life in the future.
Uncle Jack, you are not going to refuse your own brother's hand.
Nothing will induce me to take his hand. I think his coming down here disgraceful. He knows perfectly well why.
Uncle Jack, do be nice. There's some good in everyone. Ernest has just been telling me about his poor invalid friend, Mr. Bunbury, whom he goes to visit so often. And surely there must be much good in someone who is kind to an invalid and leaves the pleasures of London to sit by a bed of pain.
Oh, he has been talking to you about Bunbury, has he?
Yes, he's told me all about poor Mr. Bunbury and his terrible state of health.
Bunbury. Well, I won't have him talk to you about Bunbury or about anything else. It's enough to drive one perfectly frantic.
Of course, I admit the faults were all on my side, but I must say Brother John's coldness to me is peculiarly painful. I had expected a much more enthusiastic welcome, especially considering it is the first time that I've come here.
Uncle Jack, if you don't shake hands with Ernest, I will never forgive you.
Never forgive me?
Never, never, never.
Well, this is the last time that I shall ever do it.
It is pleasant, is it not, to witness so perfect a reconciliation? I think we might leave the 2 brothers together.
Cecily, you will come with us.
Certainly, Miss Prism. My little task of reconciliation is over.
You have done a beautiful action today, dear child.
But we must not be too premature in our judgments.
Oh, I feel very happy.
You young scoundrel, Algy! You've got to get out of this place as soon as possible. I don't allow any Bunburying here.
I have put Mr. Ernest's things in the room next to yours, sir. I suppose that is all right.
What?
Mr. Ernest's luggage, sir. I have unpacked it and put it in the room next to your own.
His luggage?
Yes, sir. 3 portmanteaus, a dressing case, 2 hat boxes, and a rather large luncheon basket.
I'm afraid I can't stay more than a week this time.
Merriman, order the dog cart at once. Mr. Ernest has suddenly been called back to town.
Yes, sir.
What a fearful liar you are, Jack. I have not been called up to town at all.
Oh, yes, you have.
I haven't heard anyone call me.
Your duty as a gentleman calls you back.
My duty as a gentleman has never interfered with my pleasures in the smallest degree.
Well, I can quite understand that.
Well, Cecily is a darling.
You are not to talk of Miss Cardew like that. I don't like it.
Well, I don't like your clothes. You look perfectly ridiculous in them. Why don't you go up and change? It is perfectly childish to be in deep mourning for a man who's actually staying with you in your house for a whole week as a guest. I call it grotesque.
You are not staying with me for a whole week as a guest or as anything else. You've got to leave by the 4:05 train.
I certainly won't leave so long as you are in mourning. It would be most unfriendly. If I were in mourning, you would stay with me, I suppose. I should think it very unkind if you didn't.
Well, will you go if I change my clothes?
Yes, if you're not too long. I never saw anybody take so long to dress and with such little result.
Well, at any rate, at least it is better than always being overdressed as you are.
If I am occasionally overdressed, I make up for it by being immensely overeducated.
Your vanity is ridiculous. Your conduct, an outrage. And your presence in my garden, utterly absurd. However, you have got to catch the 4:05, and I hope you have a pleasant journey back to town. This bunburying, as you call it, has not been a great success for you.
I think it has been a great success. I'm in love with Cecily, and that is everything.